Hi.
Hey Liam,
Hi.
how you doing?
Pretty good.
All right, so let's get started. So, welcome to the fifth episode of TEDx Today. We have a science enthusiast who's looking to pursue a field in medicine here with us today. He is the co-founder of the Wellness Project, which helps people learn about hygiene, and he has also worked with Enable to design cheap 3D printable prostheses. So, please welcome Liam McKenna, a rising senior at Conestoga High School.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here today to discuss the challenges that we're all facing regarding COVID-19. I'm very passionate about helping people be able to decipher between fact and fiction when it comes to the virus, and I hope that I can answer some of your questions.
All right, so let's get to know a little bit about you. So, how's your quarantine experience been so far?
So I think like most people, it's definitely been an adjustment to try to get into the new normal that we're all facing right now, especially dealing with all the technology that we're now using and reduced social interaction that we're having with other people. So especially for kids like myself who are in high school and normally have continuous interaction with their peers in school, that's definitely a piece of my life that has been lacking recently. And I think for most kids that is too. There is a piece of concerning evidence about that. Um, there's studies that just came out that are discussing the side effects or repercussions of reduced social interaction for children my age and younger, and how that could be affecting their mental health. So that's just definitely something to be aware of for people my age and even older that are more extroverted and used to dealing with people in that way. So if parents are making sure that they're paying attention to their kids and their mental health, make sure that they're staying on top of that sort of stuff. And also a big part of my life right now has just been obviously technology and using that to my advantage to make sure that I'm able to continue to meet my goals and my expectations for both school and extracurriculars. So I think a really good example of that is my club that I work with called Wellness Project has just donated a lot of masks to a charity recently, and all of the communication and organization that we've been doing for that was completely digital. So that isn't something that I've been learning to deal with, and my colleagues have been learning to deal with as well. And that sort of communication that we're doing, especially like what we're doing right now, and not having a physical TED Talk, being able to do this on Instagram Live has been like a very interesting piece of my experience with this.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. With this quarantine taking place, we've all had to learn to adapt to our new situations and a lot of times find creative ways to take up our time, like those videos you see all over the internet. And I know, especially for you, being a science enthusiast, you've spent a lot of time doing research on COVID-19, and I know you've learned a lot. And for many people like me, we still are in the dark, we still have a lot of uncertainties and there's a lot of unanswered questions. Like, when will this all go away, or when will a cure come out?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I've really been focusing a lot of my research specifically on vaccine development and how that's progressing along, because I feel like a lot of the uncertainty that people are facing are when will a vaccine come out and when will I be able to go about life as normal? Because that's obviously the goal that everybody wants right now. They want to go back to life before the pandemic happened, and they hope that the vaccine will get them there. So I think a very important piece of understanding this whole puzzle is looking at the history of vaccine development. So that's initially where I started my search. And vaccines normally take about 10 years to develop. So your typical flu vaccine, any other virus vaccine like the polio vaccine and measles vaccine, which are two of the most effective types of vaccines. The polio vaccine has about 100% efficacy, and the measles vaccine has about a 96% efficacy. So they are very effective vaccines and took many years to fully develop and come to fruition. So the fastest that we've ever developed a vaccine before was the Ebola vaccine. So that took about 5 years, and that happened when I was in about the sixth grade. So I do remember some of that, and I remember the problems that Africa was facing with this virus. But right
Mhm.
now, with the pandemic facing and affecting almost every aspect of the world, countries are pouring a lot more money into this vaccine right now. So hopefully we will be breaking records with this vaccine development, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, about when to expect the vaccine to come out and other things like that. And the way that they are developing the vaccine right now is by using a multi-pronged attempt and attack right now. So there's these things called protocols, which are how vaccines are developed and how vaccines are utilized in the body to create the antibodies to help our immune systems fight the coronavirus. So with all of these different protocols in place, many different corporations, for-profit organizations, nonprofits, universities, they're all working on a vaccine right now. So making sure that we are focusing on the trials as a whole and all the different protocols and making sure that we're pushing them all forward is our best way at eventually getting a safe and effective vaccine.
Yeah, so personally for me, I never really knew that there was being this much effort being put into developing a vaccine. I knew about like the one or two steps that it takes, but that's like really surprising information, the multi-step processes they have to go through. It's just absurd. So I have a question for you, and probably a lot of the viewers and just people in general have, is when is this vaccine expected to come out, and when are we going to be able to use it?
Yeah, so obviously that is like a very hard question to answer, but I think the short answer to that is Dr. Fauci thinks that a vaccine will be made available by early 2021, but there are many different hurdles that the vaccine has to jump over and a lot of red tape that it has to cross in order to make sure that it is effective and safe for the general public's use. So the CDC and the FDA have put these hurdles in place to make sure that it is safe. And generally, the stages that are used for all vaccines are broken down into 6 separate steps. So the first step is the exploratory phase where the doctors are looking at the best protocol to use and how they should be developing this in the lab. Second is the preclinical phase, which is where they are figuring out how this is going to interact with the human body, and they're doing small scale tests on cells and seeing how it will interact with us to make sure that it's safe for the human. And then the third step, which is the most talked about in the media right now, is what the news calls the phases, right? So we see like phase 1 vaccines, 2 and 3. So a really good example of this right now is Moderna. So a research article was just published about them a day ago on their phase 1 vaccine that just completed testing for phase 1. And it found that the immune system was producing antibodies and effectively helping the patients and the test subjects to fight against the coronavirus with no real side effects. So this is really encouraging news. And hopefully a lot of other vaccines that are coming down the pipeline will also have these results in their published phase 1 reports, and then hopefully all the way through phase 3. So breaking up those phases that I was just talking about, the one that you hear about the most, which is the stage 3 in the overall vaccine development process. Phase 1, which is what Moderna just passed, is the vaccine is being tested in about 50 different people, right? So it's very small scale, and this is right after preclinical, so they're able to inject it into people and see how it reacts with them. And then phase 2 is the blood is checked for antibodies and other aspects of the immune system that are attributed to helping fight the disease. And then phase 3 is where they really amp it up, and there is a lot more people that are being tested in this case. So they're increasing the number of participants to the thousands and adding placebos to make sure that the vaccine that they're using is actually helping people fight fighting the virus.
Okay, so there's a lot of effort going into this, and it seems that based on what you described, we should be able to get a vaccine relatively soon. So that's like the great thing. But what I'm wondering is, are there any challenges that these scientists are facing? Because, developing a vaccine for the coronavirus doesn't seem like a walk in the park. It's like there's a lot of little aspects they have to consider, and there's always places where things can go wrong.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Right now, in the same interview that Dr. Fauci did on when he was predicting a vaccine would come out, hopefully early 2021, like I just said, he said that he's hoping for about a 70 to a 75% efficacy for the vaccine. So, like I was talking before, polio and measles had many different years to mature so that the vaccine was more effective and reaching those above 90% effective rates, right? So for the vaccine right now, 70 to 75% effectiveness is very hopeful. And that is a hurdle though, because Fauci was saying that the 75% effectiveness range might not be enough in order to ensure herd immunity for most people. And this goes into conjunction with a poll that was done stating that about 1/3 of Americans said that they would actually take the vaccine. So when you're combining the effectiveness with the amount of people that are getting the vaccine, you'll find that not a lot of people will be ending up with the immunity that they need in order to truly stop the spread of this virus. So that is one challenge that a lot of people have been facing. And then another challenge along with are on the same lines as other people that are not willing to take the vaccine is actually the gender divide that occurs in accepting a vaccine and taking the vaccine. So a study was done and found that 50% of, or 56% of men wanted the vaccine, whereas only 43% of women did. So this is like a really big factor, especially when considering households and children that will be getting the vaccine and the parents that are making the decision. So along with this study, it found that women are actually the ones that make the primary health and medical decisions in a family. So making sure that we have everybody on board in the family to get the safe vaccine after it has passed all the different stages and hurdles that have been put in place by the CDC and the FDA is a really, really, really important way to make sure that we're stopping the spread. So getting that vaccine is very important.
Yeah, so there's, as you described, there's like a lot of little aspects that people need to consider, you know. It also has to do with like sociology and how people behave. And because the vaccine will be coming out soon, but there's still some delay time and there's potential setbacks. For me and a lot of students out there, we're wondering, what about the education system? You know, are the schools gonna open up in the fall or are they not? And if they do, what will our school experience be like, you know?
So right now, there's been a lot of pressure from both state leaders and federal leaders to make sure that schools do reopen in the fall. So that's something that they're pushing for right now. And the CDC has put out guidelines and regulations that they do want schools to follow if they want to reopen safely. And in this case, the CDC, since they do want schools to be reopening after a report came out saying that students are more harmed by staying at home and that their mental health is being more impacted by staying at home and not socializing with other people than they would be if they were at school and were affected by the virus or got the virus, just because younger populations tend to experience less serious symptoms, unlike their older counterparts and people with underlying health conditions. So reopening the schools, some of these guidelines are very big and they will change the way that our education works at school. I know as a high schooler, looking at some of these things look like they're just not going to happen, especially with busing and the reduced capacity on buses. Our school just does not have enough buses to be dealing with that and the capacity. So looking at all this, I think some of the best examples of it are schools should choose to stay home when they can. So this could turn into 50% of students at school while 50% of students are at home. So you could spend half your time working with your classmates in the classroom and then the other half of your time at home, distance learning, and getting a different type of education. And it kind of depends on the learner on whether or not they will be having the same educational experience as they would at school. I was talking a little bit earlier about like extroverts versus introverts and the different ways that staying at home and working with people changes, right? So if you're more extroverted, being at school might help your grades a little bit better than somebody that's more introverted and will be able to stay at home and work with distance learning to get the best outcomes. Another piece of this is making sure that we're continuing to educate families. So if your family has come in contact with somebody that has had the virus, making sure that your family knows to stay home and keep their child home so that they're not exposing more people at school to the virus is a very, very big piece of helping slow the spread. And along with that, making sure that they're aware to wear masks as well as social distance at school, and also providing information about the vaccine when it's made available to make sure that families do fully understand their options for the vaccine and how it will be made available for them. So making sure that we're following the same hygiene and respiratory etiquette that we normally would right now in stores and in hospitals where they're continually disinfecting, as well as just obviously not coughing on other people and keeping your distance. So continual cleaning will be necessary in school to make sure that it is still safe. And a big part of that is making literature available. So that's part of the education for families. So I know right before school closed, our school had signs up in the bathrooms talking about hand washing and making sure that you're really following hygiene etiquette to make sure that you're keeping everybody around you safe. And in the classroom, the dynamic is going to change as well, obviously. I know as a high schooler, a lot of students have to borrow pencils from teachers, and the teacher always has a box of pencils at the front of the class. The CDC recommends that we're not sharing any objects so that we're not spreading the virus and reducing the amount of public utensils that are out there, so less people are touching them and there is less spread that way. And physical barriers will probably need to be put in place when we're not able to maintain that 6 foot physical distance from other people, as well as wearing masks again. And the cafeterias and the libraries and our free periods and all the freedom that we get in high school and that experience that we have in high school is really going to change because public spaces, the CDC recommends, should close. So that means that the library will probably end up being closed, cafeterias, and socialization with your friends that way. And that's really going to translate into the classroom as well, because they found that reducing the amount of people that you come in contact with obviously reduces the chances of getting the virus. So they recommend that you are staying in the same classroom with the same kids and the same teacher. So in high school, that is going to be a serious challenge, whereas in elementary school, where you have the same teacher all day with the same class, that's going to be pretty easy to implement. But then when you're considering high schoolers, where we have such a large course book and we have many different classes and different levels and a whole bunch of different students and teachers that are good at teaching these courses, we're not all going to be able to stay in the same spot. So it kind of becomes a scheduling nightmare, and we're trying to figure out how that's all going to play out. But going back to that again, the CDC said that these are not set in stone. So they want to be working with each individual school district to make sure that they are coming up with the best solutions for their students and their faculty to make sure that they're able to safely reopen. So another piece to that is the cafeterias, once again, is making sure that the food is prepackaged. So they don't want any food to be out that is being produced, and they want it all to be prepackaged. And we might even end up, since the cafeterias are closed, eating in the classrooms amongst our peers instead of at the cafeteria. So that is a really big change. I know that it might seem a little daunting, especially for other high schoolers that are going into a year in high school, or even the students that are starting high school. This is really going to change the experience, and even middle schoolers. So working with these changes is really going to be difficult, but I think that we will be able to get through it.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, like the ending of socialization, I feel it's like a really important aspect of most high schoolers' lives. You know, you go to school, you get your education, but it's also a great place where you like meet your friends and hang out. And I just kind of with your saying, like it's going to have a big impact on how the high school experience changes and how, you know, people perceive high school. So with like the, like you said, the barriers and like all the multiple aspects that the school have to consider to try and keep us safe and keep the staff safe, what should we as students be trying to do to like add to the sense of security and make sure our whole communities are being protected?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we hear it every day, wear masks. Because even if as kids without underlying health conditions, we are not very susceptible to serious outcomes from the disease, it is important to continue to protect those around us, especially older staff members or people with underlying health conditions that might even be our age in our classes sitting next to us. Continuing to keep 6 feet apart, and when you are 6 feet apart, still wearing a mask, right? Because in the enclosed hallways in school, it is easier for the virus to spread than if we were outdoors. So another piece of that, making sure that we are staying outdoors. So like activities that are outdoors are going to be less risky than activities indoors, right? So if we are able to stay outside for a majority of activities, possibly like learning outside or like sporting events and being on a team, that might be a little bit more feasible to interact with other people because of that open air, once again. And continuing to practice proper hygiene to protect those around you, washing your hands, cleaning the surfaces that you've just used, because the virus does live on surfaces for a while. There's still research being done on how long, but we do know that it will stick to surfaces and you can get it that way. And then the responsibility that we do have is, besides ourselves, if we do have an underlying health condition, is just everybody around us that could be susceptible to serious outcomes from this disease.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just not about the fact that we're like low risk group and it's not as much of an issue for us, but all our teachers, even the ones we don't like as much, are susceptible to getting the virus and we need to look out for them. So I totally agree with you. We should also be like taking our proper hygiene measures and making sure we follow the in places like the restrictions the school puts in or the guidelines the school puts in. So what I wanted to ask you was, what do you think would happen to like the mental health of students, especially with this new environment, like there's no socialization really. You're just like restricted to classrooms, no free periods, especially for you as a senior. That's like the time of your life where you get to like leave home early, come to school late. So how do you think it's going to impact people's school experience and their mental health?
I think that for a lot of students, it's going to change, right? So if you're able to be at home for a prolonged period of time and be okay with yourself in like a more introverted experience, then it won't be affecting you the same way as it will somebody that will be leaning on that social interaction that they have in school. So making sure that parents are aware of this right now, because a lot of students are actually diagnosed in schools. So there's a lot of services that schools provide. This is one of the reasons that the government is pushing for schools to open right now. One of those is mental health services. So a lot of schools actually catch diseases such as ADHD and anxiety disorders in school. And then a lot of students actually get treatment there too. So when you're out of school, you're losing that mental health aspect of your education that you're normally getting in school. So making sure that parents are aware of that and continuing to monitor their children to make sure that they are continuing to be okay, and just having that on parents' radars because the school isn't there for them right now. They are there in a virtual setting for most schools. Counselors are available and things like that, but you just don't have that continued interaction. So it will affect students and everybody because of our reduced socialization that we have and our more isolated world that we're living in right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's get on to some of the questions people have for you. So let me just looking through. So, someone asked a very broad question to better understand what is a virus and what makes it like so effective at transmitting.
Yeah, so the difference between a virus and other diseases, I'm going to use bacteria for example here. There is no exact treatment for virus right now. We cannot treat the common flu and cure it per se. There are treatments for it. Right now, I think a good example of that is we're coming up on flu season. Flu is going to come back even though we're amidst a different pandemic. Um, there's this thing called Tamiflu, which helps the body combat the illness. However, it does not cure it, right? So that's why a virus is a little more tricky to deal with than a bacterial infection. Like if I got a strep throat right now, I could go and get an antibiotic, which would help me overcome that disease. So this virus, unlike some other things, is airborne, which is why it is so challenging to deal with, is because it is transmitted from person to person, and the effects of that are not known yet. There's still research being done on how far, how many surfaces it can live on for how long. So it's just the transmission is not quite known yet. But as a virus goes, this one is highly transmissible and very easy to get compared to other things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, how even though we know so much about our world, there's always little aspects that we can never like exactly master, like the virus. So another question someone has for you is about your wellness project, and they just want to know a little bit about the wellness project and what you do there.
Yeah, so our mission and the thing that we are focusing on is personal hygiene for people. So we focus on local communities in our area and underprivileged children and people that might not have access to proper hygiene equipment or education for that matter. We went to a charter school in inner Philadelphia and we educated and developed a lesson plan to teach to after school kids on the best way to be continuing your oral hygiene as well as for the rest of your body. And then we donated stuff to that school as well as to the kids in individual care packages. Stuff that we're working on right now is obviously the masks, but donating supplies to local food banks so that it can be put along with other products and food and things like that, especially right now with unemployment at record highs right now, making sure that people do have cheap access to hygiene supplies as well as food, and education on how to do this is a very important aspect of everybody's life right now. So
That's fascinating. You know, you like a lot of people coming together as a community is really important. And, like spreading knowledge, especially right now, is pretty important too. So it's really awesome what you're doing. It's really amazing, and you know, we really hope you keep up the work. Is there any way we could like donate to your?
yeah, so we have a GoFundMe right now that is working on getting resources so that we can eventually buy more masks and donate it to local charities. The one that we just donated to the masks recently is called TE Cares. So that organization focuses on helping people in our township specifically. So these masks are going to workers that were working in fire stations, police stations, hospitals. So all of the essential workers that we have right now, those masks are going to them because this went early on in the pandemic when protective equipment was not made available for people that needed them and are essential workers. So I will send you guys the link, and then that can be made available if anybody wants to donate.
That's awesome. So some of the people are asking, what would happen to extracurriculars? Because, you know, it's like a different environment from school. There's more contact, but then again, it's more open air. So how do you think extracurriculars would play out, like sports?
Yeah, so sports have actually started, a lot of them that aren't with the schools. So intramurals and club sports have begun again. They're making sure that they are playing outdoors. So basketball teams are playing on courts outside at parks instead of inside of gyms where it is a increased risk of spreading the disease. So making sure that you are staying outside when possible for these sports is very important. Obviously, there's going to be problems when you're playing like ice hockey or something like that. You're not going to be able to be there. But also wearing masks whenever you're really close to people in contact sports is less of a problem in games like soccer when you're kind of far away from people and you're passing the ball. It does get physical sometimes, but it's not as much of a risk as football. But you are wearing a mask in football, so it is very dependent on the equipment that you're wearing and the season, and especially where you're playing the game. So it's all very dependent. But then making sure that we're staying outside. Our high school, like I said, is having a graduation event, and they're making sure that they're spreading it between 3 different groups of people, and they're sanitizing everything and making sure that it is clean. But the band is also playing, right? So they're outside and they're playing, right? The practices have all been outside so far, and we're not in the band room. We're outside, we're playing. So just all extracurriculars in general are trying to take place outside and adapting to our new normal.
You know, it's amazing. So now this question is directed more a little more personally. So what piqued your interest in medicine and why did you choose to go in that direction?
Yeah, so personally, my grandmother and my grandfather both had neurodegenerative diseases. So my grandmother had Alzheimer's and my grandfather had Parkinson's. So that really sparked my interest in it, seeing them and working with their doctors. And I would go to their doctor's appointments and listen to the doctors and just be fascinated and all the different treatments and things that they were going to do. Originally, my TED Talk was going to be on deep brain stimulation for the treatment of Parkinson's. And that was something that my grandfather was looking into, and it really sparked my interest in it. And then when I got into high school, I just really fell in love with my like chemistry, biology courses. That just became my passion. So that's what I'm pursuing right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. You know, it's like very important field, especially with like these rare diseases that we don't know much about. The more that we spend time and effort like you hope to do, it's like it's the way that we cure them. And basically what you're gonna do is pretty much for the betterment of everyone. So that's great. And another question we have is, so now how much of an impact will the changes implemented now have on the years after COVID-19?
This is more of an opinion. I think it's going to change almost everything. Handshaking people when you meet them in business conversations, is that going to be the same? I don't know. there's going to be a social shift, like a new paradigm, and just there's no way to see what's going to happen for the future and how this will be affecting schools and whether COVID will actually ever go away. Will it just become something like the flu where we're getting a vaccine every year and treating the symptoms for it? So there is no way to tell. I do think that there will be a bit of a social shift in the way that we're interacting with people in the future. And especially right now for companies, I know a lot of parents are online working at home and it's very efficient. I know like sending emails, I'm like, you're not walking from class to class, you're just joining meetings, you're sending emails. There isn't a lot of chitter chatter basically between a lot of different people, which I feel is important to our socialization and our development as kids. But as adults, it really helps improve efficiency in companies. So I'm not sure how that will adapt and change in the future, but we'll see what happens.
All right, great. It was such a pleasure having you here today. It was very informative. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure the viewers learned a lot too. And thank you so much for joining us today for the fifth episode of the TED Talk. And thank you, Liam, for your amazing talk. We'll
Cool.
see you guys next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.